And here's where I would normally take a little break, but I'm not going to. We're at an hour and a half. I'm just going to power on through. So if you need to pause here, please go right ahead. So here's Freddie's chart again, and we're looking at the moon conjunct Pallas Athena and joining past expression with retrograde asteroids. He is a male with overwhelming divine female understanding and nature. He's just a bit too bright for this world. One thing that I have noticed and seen and come to understand, and I really thank Jeffrey a lot for this, is that men who display the female side of themselves are displaying a very strong aspect of character. They're showing their sensitive side, and in a sense that's strengthening who they really truly are, because when women are strong and men are sensitive, it's balancing their true nature and making them a better person and a more whole person, and they can better understand themselves and get along with others. So and it's also a sign of evolution that when you use the male or female side of yourself, we all contain male, female, that we're better prepared to take on challenges and understand the intricacies of life and the complexities of life, as opposed to just going through life with a very extreme male or female attitude or opinion. So that's what I see with the moon down here, conjunct Pallas Athena, the female warrior, and in the territory of Black Moon Lilith, conjunct the South Node, which I think to some degree is influencing the moon. They are 13 degrees apart. That's a wide or arc, but they're also tempered by Pallas Athena, which is actually conjunct the South Node. And they're also in the territory down here near the IC with the asteroid Ceres, retrograde, by the way. And then here is Vesta in Aries, retrograde as well, below the horizon. So he's in good company with a lot of female influence, we might say that. And he's definitely uses it and expresses it. And I think it helps to make him more of a whole and complete and interesting human being. The North Node in Gemini, conjunct Uranus here, is in separating stage from Uranus in the 9th house. The North Node is going clockwise, the Uranus is proceeding counterclockwise. They're separating. To me, that suggests some past life influence, and that this is a very karmic signature, and that he's really learning to liberate his mind this lifetime. And that he's coming to a karmic fruition of liberating the mind this lifetime, because it looks like he has been dealing with retrograde mental situations in the past and in past lives. And he's coming to a sort of a karmic release this lifetime, where he's freeing the mind this lifetime and learning to free his mind this lifetime, something he'll never really have to go through again. So because they're in a separating stage, the implication is he's been working on that for a while, choosing to liberate his way of reacting to a past or very ingrained belief pattern this lifetime. His family was Zoroastrian, and they studied the Zoroastrian faith, which is a very old, deep-seated, very, very old religion. I wouldn't call it patriarchal, except in the sense that it probably was a long time ago, most likely. But today, it's hard to say. It's modernized, and it's not for me to criticize or say I don't know if it's patriarchal or not. It may or may not be. Zoroastrianism offered the belief that life is a celebration and earthly existence is a prelude to the afterlife where many blessings await. So it's really a different kind of a religion, and it looks like this is where his roots are and what he was brought up in. He was introduced or initiated ceremoniously into the religion at the age of 6, I believe, and they dressed him in flowers and a uniform and did ceremony and lit fires and did prayers, and did ceremonial dressings and dancing and lots of singing and chanting and so forth. So it's really a very colorful faith, I'll put it that way, and extremely old, one of the oldest on earth, that dates back to recognized around 600 BC in ancient Persia, and it's thought to have originated at least 1,000 years ago in ancient Iran, or excuse me, in ancient India. With the asteroids here on the ice, at the bottom of the chart, southern hemisphere, perhaps he's experiencing a divine feminine influence and wisdom that supports him in a man's world. Also, the Sagittarius Gemini signature here along the north and south nodes is reversed in houses, accelerating the impulse to evolve. The 12th house cusp here, Virgo, denotes union and communion with Creator. Virgo, sun sign Virgo, Mars in Virgo, denotes being the platform or springboard of the impulse to spiritualize, coming to earth, doing the work, etc. So one thing that Jeffrey talks about, and that is pretty easy to recognize in a chart, is that it's the 6th house that it is the springboard for the impulse to spiritualize the 12th house. And it is also Virgo that is the constellation or the archetype that is the springboard to spiritualize, which can be seen conversely in the 6th house here, where Pisces rules his 6th house. So, and also, Mercury that rules Virgo is the foundational theme or planet that is said to be the springboard or foundation for Neptune. Interesting. And they all aspect, you can't really see it here, but they all aspect each other. And one thing that I really want to point out is that this Vesta is fascinating to me. It stands for the goddess of the hearth. And because we're kind of running low on time, I've seen Vesta in dream. I won't go into it now, but she's very old and she's very unique. And when I saw her in the dream, it was down to the very most minute detail. I could see everything in exaggerated focus. And she carries a little lamp or a little light. And she's thought to be the center of civilization or the village or the tribe or the family. And she carries a spiritual light. So here's Vesta carrying the light of man, Aries, the light of life, and representing the hearth and the spire and the fire and the light of life at the heart of civilization or the town or the individual. She stands for the goddess of the hearth and also the guardian of the heart, the sacred fires of the heart. Here it is, very old in the 6th house, and it's perpetuating her Neptune. So I know I'm on the right track, and Neptune is culminating this lifetime. So he's dealing in some way with past life, prior life, religious conditioning, and belief systems, and he's carrying the light. He is carrying the light, retrograde, of perhaps being a fire keeper or a fire carrier in past lives, or an enlightened one or an inspired one, and he's bringing it into this life. And he's releasing conditioning patterns and making that faith and that religion and that remembrance his own, finding his own path, finding his own spirituality. And when I look at that, I realize what a light he was in this life to tens of thousands of people. And it's almost like he has modernized Vesta and brought it into this life and become the incredible, overwhelming, unspeakable inspiration that he has been, like no other musician that I've ever seen or known or heard of in my lifetime. So it all stems from this light, and that's how I see it. Okay. So one of his work ethics was, and he has a strong work ethic, was however you feel, get up, dress up, show up. So even though he was in modern day Europe, and he was becoming a rock star and all of that, he was still carrying an ancient symbolism and archetype of Vesta. And that's one of the main points of my reading, is that we transform life to life, but we carry the same energy. And to me, he was a spiritual light and inspiration. There's no doubt about it. The first house, he's learning through the experiential reality of relationships. So he's experiencing relationships this lifetime. He said in many instances, he was lonely. He had people all around him, but he was still lonely. So he's experiencing how to deal with relationships. He's been alone for quite some time. Mars in the first, he's been independent and known how to get along and take care of himself for a long time. But he said it in several instances that the more people he had around him, the more fame he had, the more important he became, the more lonely he became. So he's still working on these themes right here, and that's a very loaded house. And you can really see it there, that he's actively learning the and understanding the art of relationship through experiential reality this lifetime, School of Hard Knocks. He is third stage individuated, transiting to first stage spiritual. It's kind of easy to see because he's leaving one stage, culminating one stage here, and entering into a spiritual stage in the 12th house. It looks like an ending and a beginning here, where he's setting off on a new a new set of understanding and discoveries in his personal self and in his desirous nature, let's put it that way. But here's the spiritual influence right here, coming into first stage spiritual right here. There's no doubt about it. It's almost like he's dying and being reborn to a new life. And unfortunately, he only lived to the age of 45. Karmic release or previous retrograde signatures and influences, question mark. So Uranus is separating from the North Node up here in the 9th house. It implies a kind of karmic fruition regarding personal belief patterns, a karmic release or completion. There's an end to everything we experience. So I do feel that he's probably been persecuted for his beliefs in past lives, or he's just wanted to free himself from religious conditioning. And, you know, he certainly did that this lifetime. And I'm certain to the chagrin and at times disappointment of his parents, but they loved him very much and they accepted him, and they always worked things out. But he was expressing himself very originally in a very individuated state this lifetime, there's no doubt about it. But I don't think he was any less spiritual than anyone else. In fact, I think he was tremendously spiritual in his own way. And what I see here with Uranus separating from the North Node, I know this is getting somewhat laborious, but it's very important, is that I believe that he's looking to see past belief systems in general and just coming into his own knowingness. That is a 9th house trait. He's developing his instinctual body this lifetime, North Node in the 9th house. He's coming to know things like the animals do, and the great mammals of the ocean and the birds of the sky. He's coming into almost a Gnostic sense of his communion and relationship with Creator. He's just coming to know what he knows and accept that and believe in himself and his God, and learning self-love, which actually compels us to understand the love of God. The moon gives foundation and expression. Here's his moon right here of his past. It's, let's see here. It is separating from the South Node at the IC. Pallas Athena is here at the South Node, and Black Moon Lilith, as we talked about, and Ceres and Vesta, all emphasizing and influencing his personal relationship to himself, and how he operates and his personal freedom in the world, and how he conducts his business, and how he thinks and operates, and his mental abilities, third house, his, like I said, his personal freedom, and really all accessing the way he's learning and the way he's the way he thinks, the way he thinks. So I think he has an ability to really use both sides of the brain, um, so to speak, male and female, and that's made him a more balanced person and a more whole person. And he was a musical genius. He was a prodigy, and the music that he made, I think, comes from someone who is very balanced in the way of both male and female. A man in a male body with tremendous female sympathies and understandings and sensitivities. And he loved women. Mars conjunct Neptune in the 1st and 12th houses, right here, shows a bit of an ending and a separation to a new life, new realities, and Mars culminating to a sense of newfound spirituality this lifetime. Okay. He was a musical prodigy at the age of 8. He heard harmony all around him. And observing his chart, I can almost see how teacher healers who walk the earth are launched. Because the dear man passed away at the age of 45, if he were to come back, I think he would come back as a very wise and kind teacher, healer. And I can see how he's accumulating that soul power and ability to heal and teach and guide and be an inspiration this lifetime. If you just look at what he did for the masses with his performances and his music, and you imagine him coming back again in some capacity, he carries the strength of inspiration and the beauty of song, and that is a great soul power in my book. His 12th house Neptune is so close to Source. This is the house of Source and communion with Source. It allows a natural, evolved release from the cares of this world when the time comes. And indeed, when his time comes, he told the people around him, he made amends, he made plans. He said, I don't want this, I don't want that. I want you to take my ashes where someone will never know where they are. He really culminated things this lifetime. He really took care of the details, and he said, now it's time for me to go. And he pretty much picked the time for him to leave this world. And he also helped to plan his own funeral. That's something that I see with him keeping in league with what we call the Parsi faith. The Parsi was I'm not that knowledgeable on it, but it was a part of the Zoroastrian faith, and it was the people that the faith that his parents belonged to, and it was part of the faith on the island that he was born, and the school that he went to in Bombay. It was called Parsi system or class or faith, and they were very ritualistic and ceremonial, and he, as a true Virgo, carried those ceremonies with him more than I think only he and his family would realize. Other people in the outside world wouldn't see it unless they really studied his life. But like I said, he did help to plan his own funeral down to the last detail and tell people what he wanted. So he has ties to the past and to his faith. He's not relinquishing it. He's just going to a deeper level, a more personal level. And I think that's something that we see in this Uranus conjunct and separating from the South Node in the 9th house, that I consider to be somewhat of a retrograde nature or retrograde signature or a past retrograde principle. So he was very detail oriented, and he also said to his father before the concert at Live Aid, he said, remember, Father, I remember what you taught me. He said, good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And he went off to perform at Live Aid for the betterment of Africa and the starving populations in Africa. So he took a lot of his faith to heart. He's not abandoning it, he's deepening it. And I just think he used music as his vehicle of expressing that faith to a great extent, which was deeply personal. Mercury quincunx are in conjunct Vesta. Mercury is in conjunct Vesta. An inconjunct denotes an aspect of fundamental lack or the need for adjustment. So that means that Vesta is looking toward Mercury. Vesta in the 6th house of Virgo is looking toward Mercury and Virgo in the 11th house for adjustment. And remember that Virgo represents his spiritual past, his deep, deep, ancient spiritual past. Vesta is the goddess of the hearth, referred to as the keeper of the flame in Roman mythology. She's the oldest and brightest of the asteroids and is considered Virgoan in her spiritual capacity to meter, comfort, and aid to all who seek spiritual guidance and direction. One thing that Freddie talked about a lot in his work is that he was giving the people what they want. So what did I just say? She is considered Virgoan in her spiritual capacity to meter, comfort, and aid to all who seek spiritual guidance. Virgo, the 6th house, Mercury are about giving to the masses and giving to the world. And so here you see this really important theme in his life is giving back and being reciprocal. And he has some very, very deep values that he's coming to own and make his own this lifetime and not depending on anyone else's interpretation or telling him what to believe. They're becoming highly individualized and independent and ingrained upon his soul this lifetime. Virgo is often depicted carrying a small lamp. She's a symbol of the keeper of the fires in Roman mythology. The sacred fires are a foundation of the ancient Zoroastrianism faith, which has roots back to ancient Persian Empire, circa 600 BC, and ancient India as far back as 1000 BC. Some of their fire temples were where the Parsis worship contained sacred fires that are kept permanently burning. In some parts of Iran, there are fires that are 2,000 years old and are tended to 5 times a day by the priests of the temple. Now, anybody who studied Freddie's life knows that he did not talk about his past or his family beliefs. In fact, he tried to separate himself from them to a large degree. This wasn't because he was ashamed of them or he didn't agree with them, not at all. It's just he didn't identify with their concepts and he wanted to make these belief systems his own. And truly his own. And also there were some real traumatizing mental tapes in his head of persecution and ostracization and inequality and putting people down of so-called nationality, faith, color, or creed that I can just feel in this chart. I know that he has seen persecution and misuse and abuse in his lifetime that has been cultural. And so he just didn't go there. I think he probably saw some unspeakable things as a young boy, especially in India, that he just doesn't go back to that religion and that culture and dwell on it or speak of it very much. There was one more thing that I wanted to read to you regarding this very ceremonial faith. And this is an article that I found by Rick Sky called The Show Must Go On, The Life of Freddie Mercury. And it talks about Zoroastrianism. The fire temples where the Parsis worship. Oh, okay, let me start again. Religion played an important role in Mercury's life. He went with other Zoroastrian youngsters to the fire temples where the Parsis worship. The sacred fires are a crucial part of their religion, and prayers are said in front of them as an affirmation of a believer's faith. They are kept permanently burning in some parts of Iran. They are fires that are burned for 2,000 years. So these sacred fires, which are so amazing in the temples, are really a lot of what we have learned about the Roman mythology and underlying explanation of Vesta. So Mercury in the 4th house or Mercury in Virgo, the 11th house, conjunct Vesta in Aries. Just a continuation of that theme again. Here is Vesta in conjunct Mercury, a need for adjustment. So he's, because he has mental tapes that of past abuse and mistreatment. He's seen inequality and suffering and poverty in India, and even violence in his hometown. He's sort of restructuring the mind to do what he can in his current life and not dwell on the past. There's trauma involved here, so there's a adjustment necessary for him to make in his mind so that he can really function and function well and be whole and complete in the work that he's doing. But it's driven from past life trauma and recognizing the great inequality of life and the suffering of other people. Sixth house Virgo. And I think he felt a role to, especially with Live Aid, to sing to other people and inspire them and help them to be creative and speak up and find their freedom and their liberation this lifetime. There was a new producer early in Freddie's career, I think in his early 20s, who asked the group, what makes you any different from any other rock bands? And Freddie said, I'll tell you what it is. It's four misfits who don't belong together, playing to the other misfits, the outcasts, right at the back of the room. And we're pretty sure they don't belong either. So talk about the misfit, the underdog, the underprivileged, the underserved, the disenfranchised. This is a spiritual warrior. This man is a spiritual warrior. I don't care what anybody thinks of his life. I unequivocally love the man. I know a lot of people that do. He was on a spiritual quest and a personal crusade of sorts, and I think it all can be seen in the symbolism of the chart. Freddie, after giving admission of illness to his bandmates, I won't be their poster boy. I'll decide who I am. I'm going to be what I was born to be, a performer who gives the people what they want. I want them to hear us in the heavens. Now let's go punch a hole in the sky. So he was leading the way for other people. He was independent. He was finding his own belief systems, his own faith. He was an inspiration to others. He was living a very determined life. And I think very much in league with Creator. What a remarkable man. And it was all of the spiritual impetus, I think, was sort of masked by his music, so to speak. But he was a spiritual crusader at heart, and he gave the people what they wanted. And he described so many times that he had to keep performing, and toward the end of his life, he performed down to the minute until he couldn't sing any longer, the very last phrase in a song, until he couldn't continue. He just kept giving the people what they wanted. Do you see this retrograde influence in the sixth house and how strong that is, and how it spearheads his leading planet, and it's trying to, it's something that he's trying to redo this lifetime. It's very, very karmic. I have to be doing something every day. I want to earn my keep. I don't want to have to wake up every morning and ask, have I dried up? You know, is he looking out for me? So he's independent. He's finding his way in life. And I'm reminded of the old motto that my grandfather used to tell us, that God helps those who help themselves. He is really trying to be the man that he's meant to be this lifetime, and work in league and in sync and in concert with Creator. You're only as good as your last show, so you've got to give it all you've got. You don't know when you'll have it to do again. So he had a tremendous work ethic. He was detail-oriented. He was a perfectionist. He would practice, practice, practice. The reason that he did so well, and his band did so well at Live Aid, is they practiced for weeks, the same 20-minute set for weeks upon weeks. And he had his moves down. He watched other performers. He had them down, you know, to the last detail. And I might add, I'm not afraid of anything. A very courageous man. When the sun is squaring the nodes, as it is in his chart, it's not necessarily a skip. Well, it's not a skip step, because the sun can't be a skip step. The sun is our reason for living and our solar center this lifetime. So when the sun squares the nodes, Jeffrey's explanation is that it's a current life purpose that is trying to equally actualize the dynamics and the archetypes of the nodal axis. Sun square the north nodes is trying to actualize something here. And the reason I put the picture of the little boy in here is because he said to Mary, his love, well, one of his loves, that he had felt that people thought he was funny looking and didn't matter, or was silly or unimportant in life. And you can almost see that here, that in his eyes, that something traumatized him and carried him through the rest of life, that caused him to overcompensate, thank goodness, and perform on a stage and almost take on another persona. Lucky for us. So when the sun is squaring the nodal axis, it means typically that the soul has been trying to skip ahead prior to the current life relative to the full development of all the dynamics, archetypes of the south node, its planetary ruler, and all the aspects that connect to them. There has something to do with his highly sensitive nature, south node, peer pressure, boyhood, trauma, not fitting in, not feeling like he's, you know, part of the cool kids or the cool crowd, just really being left out, and feeling that he was different. He's trying to rectify that this lifetime. It is a south node. It does operate in a retrograde motion, and it is affecting his emotional body. And by doing that, what does he do? He becomes an extreme extrovert on stage, and he is a tremendous theatrical performer, and develops his act to the most minute detail, and has the greatest voice and genius and talent to back it up. So with the sun square the nose, there's a temptation to not actualize the south node, or look at the south node, or deal with the south node, to do so that has not yet. In other words, there's a temptation to do so that has not yet manifested, a purposeful decision choice to ignore whatever the dynamics or the archetypes are. So again, let me just say, because I'm trying to hurry here, is that there was something in his childhood that made him feel different and left out and odd and made fun of. When you look at the north node is in a very public house. It's in the house of Sagittarius. It's a house of instinctual understanding, and using the higher brain and seeking for higher understanding, so to speak. And it also has Uranus here, that is on a very intuitive level, learning to branch out and be different as they possibly can. And in that way, they are sort of undoing the past life fears and stagnation of being ostracized or made fun of, as denoted as the third house in a boyhood circumstance, or a peer pressure circumstance, so to speak. But it's really renewing the mind. The third house rules the way we think, and it's got Sagittarius there ruling it. And then the ninth house rules how we broaden our thinking, and it has Uranus ruling it. And we can look at the planetary ruler of Uranus is in the 11th house of higher mindedness and higher thinking and higher perspective. And we can look at the ruler of the third house is in the first house of experiential development through relationships. He's out there on his stage doing his thing. He's not going to have a skip step this lifetime from this solar expression and this solar experience. He's definitely dealing with the south node. The existing temptation that the soul then creates when the sun squares the nodes is a life in which it chooses to create the signature of the sun squaring the nodes. In essence, it is like the soul giving itself a warning. This is why then the entire signature of both nodes must be equally developed, with a natural Pluto polarity point leading the way. I penciled in the best of my ability. Pluto polarity point is right here at 12 degrees in the 5th house. This is huge. This is the beginning of the Pluto paradigm in his house. And that is Pluto in Leo in the 11th. Someone who has experienced great leadership in what might be considered an egalitarian society. And I do believe that there are references to royalty, not only spiritual leadership or royalty in past lives with this, excuse me, with this being, because I think a lot of what this says to me when I think of his childhood experiences and this placement of Pluto in his chart is that he has come from a place of power. He's recreated a place of power this lifetime, but it's been through extenuating circumstances. And he might be very puzzled that people don't really know who he is. But through his music and an expression, people have come around to see who he really is. He's just recreating himself this lifetime, and it's fascinating to me. So he's come from a place of prominence or maybe wherewithal or regard in an egalitarian society, and his soul, his Pluto has been working on themes of being an expressive person on in a prominent arena. So being a singer on a stage, you know, he played to stadiums, and was thought to be in one of the most tremendous performances in rock bands of all time. So this is what he's propelled to this lifetime. And I think by his example, he's inspiring other people to shine their own light and express themselves and not be stopped by past trauma or fears. Sing your song, you know, say what you have to say. He's inspiring people to really express themselves and on a world stage this lifetime. And so that's the polarity point in this chart. And the way that he's doing it is by developing the intuitive body this lifetime and trying to be his own self, walk his own walk, and play by his own rules. Quotes, I'm a simple man, I say what I mean, and I do what I want. I don't give a fit about what anybody else thinks. I'm a man of extremes, Libra rising, Scorpio in the second house. I can be very soft or very hard, very vulnerable, a big baby, or very strong when I need to be. I think that shows the soft, you know, the male female side to him that he's integrating this lifetime, balancing this lifetime. I'm quite the lover, you know. When I've had conversations with some people that actually knew him, and one of the things that I said to them is that when I dream about him, because I dream about people when I work on their chart, and when I meditate on him, I see someone who loved very deeply. He was learning to love himself, ironically enough, but he loved other people. He loved animals. He was a private philanthropist. He gave to animal and children causes. He was incredibly generous, and he loved people. And he wanted to give to them, and he felt a need to give to them, and he tried to do so sort of in private. But he had a deep love and a deep regard for people, and that's what I saw in my dreams and my meditations of him, is that he was a strong man and a, you know, popular man and all of the above, but he had a deep, deep, deep emotional side to him and a deep love for other people that is really very, very touching to me, having worked with this chart. He's a very sensitive man. No matter how you feel, get up, dress up, show up. I won't be a rock star, I will be a legend. Well, ding, ding, ding. I want to pack as much life and fun into the years that I have. He's not holding back this lifetime. He's trying to, I think, really undo old scripts and plunge headlong into any lingering fears that he might have had from past life trauma or persecution. I don't know that I want to live to be 70, and if I'm going to die, then blanket. He loved life, and he made the most of it. I would like to feel that I went without having to be a burden to anybody else. Spoken like a true Virgo, spoken like a true keeper of the flame. To me, he represents an enlightened person, a spirit carrier, a fire carrier, someone who's very responsible in that regard. The most important thing, darling, is to have a fabulous life. As long as it's fabulous, I don't care how long it is. You're only as good as your last show, so you've got to give it all you've got. You don't know when you'll have it to do again. He was serious and he was funny. He was quite the enigma. He was many things, but he was open and honest and pure. Let's see. Yeah, and he was very expressive, and he didn't hold back. I'm trying to think of something else, but I can't remember. Yeah, he just lived life to the fullest, and encouraged others to do the same. But I think he had a very serious side to him, and a lot of what other people saw in terms of the, oh, I know what I was going to say. He had a wicked sense of humor, a very macabre sense of humor, and he would kid the hardest those close to him, so much so that he could see that his humor hurt them at times, and he had to undo it and say, no, I didn't mean that. I was, I was trying to be funny. I was seeing this because I like you. And I think that his sense of humor really kept him going at times, really almost up until his last days. That sense of humor kept him alive, and he does have a Sagittarius moon. Okay, let's see, we're getting very close here. So the last movement of the fish in a very Uranian stage, the last hurrah, before it must inevitably turn toward home and allow its natural current to take over and enter first stage spiritual, the first, which is the first and very Virgoan stage of the spiritual state, according to Jeffrey. He is third stage individuated, transitioning to first stage spiritual. And this can be like a last hurrah, or playing their last chip, so to speak, before they have to take on renewed responsibility and step into a more spiritual role. It's just fascinating to me how the energy flows and changes from one stage of evolutionary consciousness to the next. The change in direction from a solar-led life and consciousness to the ever-present inner compass is first experienced through the process of individuation and liberation. So what he's coming into at the end of this life and into the next is a heavy impulse to spiritualize and go within. And if you think of him as someone who loved life and partied hard and enjoyed life and lived life to the hilt, this is a good expression of it. Third stage individuated, transitioning to first stage spiritual. And you can even see it in his eyes. You can see the seriousness in his eyes and the joviality at the same time. He is a man of extremes. Then, as a result of experiencing and absorbing the living lessons of individuation, the soul is now equipped to follow its own path, to seek communion and co-creation with Creator. I think that's seen in the 9th house direction, and I think it's seen in the 12th house, the completion of a culminating cycle of Neptune, learning to walk in co-creation with Creator. In this evolutionary transition to the spiritual state, one is learning to walk with, link up with, be in sync with, and constant communication with the spirit side of things. And this can never be lost because it's carried in one's soul as a result of having lived planetary existence, Virgo, and the subsequent evolution through the emotional body. I do want to say in the most respectful way that I think that his dying this lifetime represented a passage of some sort into the spiritual world. And if he does decide to come back to this plane of existence, I think he would come back as a highly spiritual, like I said, tremendous, great teacher healer, and an even greater light than he was in this lifetime. I think he's conquered death, and I think he's not afraid of anything now. And I think he's walked into a new world. And I think he's just fine. I had a Native American teacher who was an ordained Christian minister, and he said his role in life is to link others to Creator. He says he doesn't care if they believe that God is in a tree or the moon or the ocean. He's simply helping them to link to their Creator. Please remember that the planetary north node of Neptune for everyone on this planet today is Leo, personal, creative, self-actualization, and self-discovery. I just said that. There it is. Personal self-actualization and self-discovery. How to recreate oneself. How to rebirth oneself. Even if the child within did not get everything that they needed from their parent. How to find that pride and uniqueness within oneself. In the color purple, the character Whoopi Goldberg said, she played a poor black woman. She said, I may be poor, I may be black, I may even be a woman, but I'm here, damn it, I'm here. The archetype of North Node of Neptune in Leo is one of, I am here, I have a right to be here, I am a force to be reckoned with. And I find that very, that film very significant. I almost worked on it. Leo also, but ironically enough, I wasn't of a minority and they wanted minorities to work on it, so I was not able to work on it. That's fine. Leo also represents our purpose for living, this lifetime, and our special destiny. In short, it is the will to live and to continue striving and creating once we realize how shiny we are and that our true parents are Father, Mother, God. Leo is pulling herself up by the bootstraps and telling us, being our own parent, rebirthing ourselves. Realize that we're wonderful and beautiful. We have a right to be here. We have special talents and gifts and abilities that must be shared. So that's the North Node in his chart. The North Node of Neptune is on his Pluto. And we're getting close here. So I just want to talk about, I'm probably just going to skim through this. We're going to talk about soul power and Live Aid. Live Aid took place on July 31st, 1985. Soul power is someone that has attained a soul magnitude, such a magnitude that when they pass from this earth, they release something into the atmosphere and the universe that becomes accessible and universal to all and helps unite others. Well, at 39 years of age, Live Aid took place, and for 20 minutes on stage, Queen ruled the world. I'll leave it at that. It's on the internet. You can watch it, yourself. There's plenty of YouTubes. But at the age of 39, in his chart, Pluto was rising. The South Node in Scorpio, transiting South Node, is transiting his second house cusp. And it's applying pressure to him, learning to love himself and be self-reliant and evolve, on his own if need be, to find what he needs within himself and an inner emotional strength. Saturn is also applying retrograde pressure to his South Node here in the second house of self-reliance and self-love. A lot of power in this chart at this time. That's why I say showtime. He's learning to take on and accept and move with his personal power. Third to ninth house, third house, South Node to ninth house, North Node. He has Chiron here in a stellium, and approaching, led by Chiron in Uranus. He has Uranus shaking up his South Node. Move, do something, do something, anything, but move and make change and express yourself. So he has a lot going on with the nodal, activating the nodal axis. I just put here, gaining new knowledge and experience while remaining open to all belief systems and non-judgment. He has been developing the intuitive body and his own inner truth and sense of direction for some time. Chiron, Venus, and the moon approaching his North Node in Gemini up here, are all opening up pathways in the brain for breakthrough and liberation, personal expression, and creative rebellion. North Node in Gemini is rewiring the brain. So, or stands for rewiring the brain. He's ready to move. He's ready to move. He's ready to make his move. He's ready to bust loose. Before his Live Aid performance, he told his father that he had listened to him when he taught him the Parsi saying, good thoughts, good words, good deeds. This is something that Freddie was meant to do, was destined to do, and he knew he had to do it. It was karmic. It was part of his soul path this lifetime. We can better understand how a boyhood sense of powerlessness led Freddie to become the voice of inspiration that he was, and in this case, how a midlife sense of powerlessness over a vicious disease inevitably will lead to a gained sense of soul power. We're talking about reincarnation here, and his work and his processes in the spirit world, and how that still lingers and affects the lives of us down here who knew him and knew of him and benefited from his music. If he thought he wasn't afraid of anything in his lifetime, he certainly is not afraid of anything now. The eyes have it. In the end, it's all in the eyes. They are fueled by the moon. And our windows to the soul. That's something Jeffrey taught. He said you can see everything you need to see in the eyeballs, and that's something that I've used since I've studied with Jeff for over 25 years. They can reflect past life soul intentions and in between life agreements with Creator. You can see the openness and honesty in his eyes, the hidden man, the eternal optimist, the enigmatic yet paradoxical Virgo, the serious boy inside the playful one. You can perceive an almost reluctance at having been born, of having to return to this earthly existence, reflected in Neptune in the 12th, on the ascendant and Mars rising. It is not that he didn't love life, he did, but it's as if he glimpsed something way beyond this earth, and is as if he has glimpsed something way beyond this earth, and has come back for a very special purpose, most culminating degree of the spiritualizing impulse, Neptune, at the end of the 12th house. He's coming back for his very special purpose, and his sun in the 12th house as well. And according to the Pluto paradigm in his chart, his nodal placement, it seems to express himself fully and light a fire inside of others to do the same. Sometimes I'd wish I'd never been born at all, is one of his quotes. Goodbye, everybody, I've got to go. Got to leave it all behind and face the truth. That's what he wrote in Bohemian Rhapsody, that could have been paradoxically quite self-autobiographical. Mama, please let me back inside were some of his last lyrics to this incredibly beautiful and plaintive song, Mother Love. It's the last song that he recorded. So I do think that he's glimpsed a bit of the divine. I think that's something of his power, something of the power that he carries from the influence of ancient Vesta that is seen culminating degree of this lifetime. And I think he showed us a glimpse of the divine. I think that he has brought part of it back to his life here on earth this lifetime. And perhaps he was very, very ready to return, perhaps too soon, but in the final sense, I think that he Neptuned out, as Jeffrey called it, and was able to pass peacefully and know that he was going to a greater existence. Remember that the Zoroastrian faith teaches that this life is just a pathway or a direction for the afterlife, which is thought to be full of blessings. As with most human conduits to source, Freddie's fans grieved no differently at his departure. One thing that I've seen in the charts that I've worked on Kurt Cobain, David Bowie, George Michael, Tom Petty, David Cassidy, and now Freddie Mercury, is that the people that grieve their loss, it's not so much that they're sad that they're gone because I know that they're in a better place, but they had a conduit to source. And I think that a lot of the fans feel, oh no, don't turn off the tap. You're a source to inspiration, don't take it away. But Freddie was teaching us, as all other musical masters were teaching us, to find it within ourselves. His widely mourned transition released something to the universe, thinning the veil just a bit more for all of us. His passing helped to strengthen the assurance of ultimate meaning and reason for living in this life and the next. It's a 12th house lesson, a Neptunian lesson, a spiritualization lesson. Toward the end of his life, he came to spend more of his days at a quiet retreat in Montreux, Switzerland, on the water's edge near the swans, allowing its peace and beauty to become his refuge, Neptuning out, so to speak. So he really was changing as he came into his latter, the ripe old age of 45. He was changing, he was slowing down, he was returning inward. He self-admitted it. He was slipping toward Neptune and leaving tens of thousands of broken hearts in his wake, while punching a hole in the sky for all of us to follow. And this is Montreux. This is him and his bandmates in Montreux. There's a deeper current in life always for all of us. Unlike the transitory nature of planetary retrogrades that appear to move backwards through the zodiac, there is an undercurrent, a deeper layer that affects our human life as well as life, that affects our human lives as well as all life on Earth. That is the undercurrent of Neptune, Pisces, the 12th house, that whispers directly to our soul in dreams, meditation, and immersion in nature. It is a subtle voice that must be cultivated and allowed, but it is simultaneously woven into the fabric of our being by our outward strivings and inward revelations. There are two directions in life, striving and seeking the inward revelation, and they are crossed in the sign of Pisces. Neptune, the higher octave of Venus, represents ultimate meaning, ultimate value and ideals, and ultimately our reason for living. You might say it's the ability to attune ourselves to the voice of God, which comes from a weaving of outward striving and inward allowance, reminds you of the ocean, patience and self-love, allowing oneself to learn to just be and to be worthy of love, just the way we are. You might say that Neptune is symbolizing the end of strife and the beginning of personal acceptance. And that is tantamount to personal acceptance of your innate relationship with Creator that you never lose. You just lose track of. Isn't it interesting how those amazing, talented people who heed the call of the inward voice and pursue what they personally need and value in life, Venus, and what Freddie showed us in his life circumstances, they somehow get raised and elevated up to a position to unite and inspires others to do the same. Neptune influence. And there was no greater example of unification than him at the Live Aid concert, where he united 1.5 billion people in song. The backward pull then of Neptune is the impulse to suspend, slow down, release, and allow, like a canoe on a river, to ultimately learn to drop the oars and allow our unconscious impulse to flow downhill, to remember our true selves and begin the process of returning home. And I want to start with this slide in closing, and just say that Jeffrey explained to us a story about Neptune. And in that story, he talked about your natural current, referring to Neptune, Pisces, in the 12th house. And he said, it's like a bunch of yuppies who set out on a yacht with a caseload of martinis. And when they start out, everything's cool and peaceful and calm. And they're sharing their martinis, and suddenly the boat becomes enveloped with a thick fog. The compass stops working and they can't see. The tendency is to freak out. But to those of us who know that we have a natural current inside of us, Neptune, Pisces 12th house, and that current will always take us to shore, to a new land, we would know to just let the current take us. But those of us who are spiritually oriented know that we have developed and cultivated a link to Creator and to all things natural and all things interrelated and all things that are connected to all other life forms. And to those of us who know that, we would know that we have a natural compass inside of ourselves, Neptune, and that compass will always find itself to another shore. It might be one that we've never seen before, that we don't recognize. It might be new to us. It might be foreign, but will always take us to land, and we will always have to do, and all we have to do is remember to steer our life by that inner compass. And then he laughed and said, but what the question is, how many people are prepared to live their lives in that way? Well, I think that Freddie Mercury was on a good path. And that's all that really matters. He'll find his way. And that's what really matters in the end. So I have a little slideshow I'd just like to leave on. And here we go. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and I'd just like to say that if you enjoyed this lecture and were inspired or deepened your understanding of the retrograde nature, I think that's a good thing. And I think Freddie would like that. And I just want to tell you thank you for coming and welcome back.